Scoopy, it's the South Sydney Rabbitohs. There's lots of different colours on this screen, mate. Talk us through this team overall. How do you see them going this year, and why is there so much potential value?
It's good to finally get to these teams that have got some changes that will be relevant to fantasy. There's just a lot of movement at Rabbitohs, and we've also probably expect them to do better than what was it 16th they came last year with Wayne Bennett. Yeah, there's quite a shift. So one of those ends up with there being shockingly player with decently chance to be 10 points of value rather than like five, six, seven. We'll think about it.
Exactly. Yeah, we finally see some green and less yellow, or finally some of them not yellow for once, which is good. But mate, start with him, Pete Mavrozelis, the first guy in green. You've got him at 11.85 points of value, and tell us why.
Yeah, you've got a starting hooker that's priced below 25. He's probably going to get the majority of the minutes, at least early season, until either Humphreys maybe takes over or Starling was seen meeting with Bennett the other day. So I don't know if he'll last forever, but as long as he's starting at hooker, his PPM's not too bad. And yeah, that's just you buy starting hookers that are priced like 350k. You just buy them.
Definitely, and that's good signs that if he was to stay at that same PPM with 55 minutes, which is very conservative, then there's still plenty of value, and you'd only need
Mm.
sort of 6 weeks with that to get the job done, mate. And they don't have a buy early, which kind of stunts that growth if anything, if anything goes funky and haywire at the Rabbitohs, that's for sure. So that's good news on that front. And for anyone you want to buy, guys, they don't have their first one until that first major buy, but they're an interesting team, aren't they, mate? Because if you were to hold one of these guys through, you get them for every other major and minor buy until round 19. It's pretty wild, hey?
Yeah, they're the team that's got one of the most. It's a difficult draw, as in who they face, probably the hardest in the comp, but the buys are all really quite far apart from each other. So there's not many weeks where you're going to be, not many periods of the season where you're just waiting to sell Rabbitohs players because they're going to miss two of the next five or something like that. They're really nice to target in these particular stretches, and it won't hurt too much to hold them until possibly the head-to-head grand final around 26. Um, and then, I don't know, they probably won't rest too many people in round 27, you'd think,
Yeah.
after week 26. But yeah, just a bit awkward at the end of the year.
Yeah, well, we found round 26 last year was a bit of an awkward one, but it might be different this year. Round 27 sucked in 2023. So, yeah, we'll have to. It seems to be, we find this information out about round 21 or 22. So, we'll get to that in a long while, mate. There's plenty to go under the bridge before that one. But let's go to one of the boys in blue, and that's Latrell Mitchell in that beautiful fullback role that he ended up kicking a lot as well in general play last year. Do we think that stays the same for starter?
I think he'll kick. I don't think he'll kick as much as when White was in the halves, but it's a very new spine. They've got no Cook, they've got no Ilias, and so I think with Wayne potentially getting the best out of him, and all the fit trail talk with that trimmed down photo of him with the beard the other day,
So
I
good.
really do think there is potential for him to step up and put up some monster numbers this year. He had three bins last year, and that was probably the only thing that even slightly saved non-owners in that stretch where he was just tearing it to bits. If you take those out and add the 30 minutes of game time and however many games it was that he scored, he probably puts 3 or 4 points more on his average.
That's pretty wild for a guy that actually is priced at 60 there, mate. What do you do with him? Is he someone that you can confidently start with? He has everything, doesn't he? Apart from, the Dylan Edwards style 200 meters a game running.
Yeah, that's the thing. The thing with Latrell is that he's sort of been one to take a game and make these brilliant plays, but not necessarily for the whole game. But if he can start to do that with Wayne pushing the Rabbitohs around a bit, he will be absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, because that month I was a non-owner myself, and you could just see he wanted his hands on the ball, and that's something that he hasn't had, or he'd come in and out of games or whatever it be, and you're like, wow, if he did this, semi regularly for the game, he'd be incredible. But yeah, when you're looking at how he can change his body and fitness and the like, then wow, is this a time where we do get him a little bit more like that month stretch before he got injured again, or is that another thing that because he went so hard in that month, that's when the injuries can come because he wasn't as fit. It's an interesting one, isn't it? With longevity and the amount that these guys put on their bodies through. That's where the injuries seem to be coming up, hey, over the last bunch of years. Is the faster the game gets, a lot of the injuries do come, and if you're unfit or not fit enough, let's say, then it can cause problems, mate. But is he someone that you could start with?
Oh, I think you'd have to sacrifice another key player to start with him because he's going to be priced at 60. That's borderline Haas Yo price. And you'd have to be really, really confident. Like maybe you pick uh, two or three value middles instead of buying a Haas or a Yo. Or you, instead of buying Cleary, you stock up on those sort of budget keeper gun halves like Burton, like Fogarty, that type of stuff, and you buy a Latrell. But even then, there's other guys in this keeper position that are pretty solid, like Drinkwater if he picks up goals. So really, it's going to have to be a gut call. But I mean, we know that he can score that. It's just tough to take a wing fullback to start the year in a position that generally starts slower and forward start a bit better.
Yeah, he started really well in Vegas last year, and I wonder if he can do the same. But when you are talking
Mm.
strategy, mate, you've got a little bit more safety, let's say, up in the mids, but maybe a little bit less upside. And apart from Payne Haas, a little bit of Isaiah Yeo, especially in the back end of last year, you had that 80 plus upside. But if you're buying Latrell at the beginning, you're buying someone with that upside, which is great. If you're looking at, in the centers, the guy you might buy with upside is like a Herbie Farnworth who has 100 upside. If you're buying and spending lots of cash in the halves, you're looking at, Hines and Cleary who have that 80, 90, 100 upside. And as you said, if you're buying a couple of cheaper guys in the mids, and then you're looking for, hopefully they can get to like a 50 average for you, and then you're looking for upside down Latrell. Can you see there's lots of different ways you can go about it? Do you think they're all viable, like spending up on an upside gun in whatever position it is, not just in that mids or at half?
I think this is a year where you can a bit, or also because there are a couple of positions, especially wing fullback, where there's not too much happening down below that. So there's a few guys, and some that we'll talk about shortly, but really it makes it a bit more appealing for those guys like Latrell and Drinkwater this year instead of probably waiting for a little while. So they're still a risky, not really typical play, but there's probably more reason to do it this year than other years, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. Well, if we cast our eyes back to last year, with Edwards started incredibly well, and he was banging out score after score, and with that goal kicking as well. So that's a big part of it is having that extra little safety in the goal kicking. You went to Drinkwater was only okay to start the year, but Tedesco was incredible from ball one last year. So and Latrell had a cracking start. He had a big score in Vegas, and then I think a solid 50 odd before copying that injury in round three or four, whatever it was. So there's definitely merit in starting one of these top tier guys who have that tremendous upside, and that's what we are looking for. It's that safety in some type of a floor, or they just score
Mm.
in so many ways. Latrell offloads the ball like crazy. He can make 4 or 5 tackle breaks in a 15-meter run. He's got the goal kicking. He's got general play kicking, which is what we saw obviously with Ponga as well. Like people started with him last year. 2 slow games, but then it was like, oh, quick flock to Ponga because he's going nuts and hitting 70. So yeah, it's interesting, and I think this is where it's good that if you like certain players, we can make all our teams look a little bit different as well. It's something that people complain about, and I just think there's so many ways to go about it with heaps of guys with upside. So the troll's a fun one, that's for sure. But mate, we have the return of Campbell Graham. I can't wait to see him out there. Big stretch. What a legend of the game. And yeah, it was pushing nice and close to Origin before he copped all these sternum injuries, mate. So where do you think he'll be priced at, and do we see any value in him if he can come back at a sort of a reasonable yeah, you've got him as a projected average of 40. If we saw him at like a mid to high 30s, is he someone you could start with, or would you want to wait?
I'd probably classify him as a wait because there's so many things and so many unknowns. Like we will eventually know his price. I reckon they'll probably put him about 35-ish. That seems like a good injury discount for somebody that can score well,
Mm.
but with a bit of uncertainty about him. I'd say that with a different team, a very tough draw, and first time back in the team for quite a while, I don't think he'll instantly go straight back into how he was,
Mm.
but I think he'll grow into that role throughout the year. So there's a solid chance that he hits high 30s for the start of the year and then moves into that sort of mid 40s type of player for the rest of the year and becomes that guy we know can score really well. But I don't think I expect that straight off the bat.
Yeah, that's fair. And with that first couple of games, Dolphins St George, it gets you a little bit more excited for Latrell as well, doesn't it? With some potential higher scoring games. Although the Dolphins do seem to start fairly well in the first part of the season, they were top four for a long time last year before the injuries
Mm.
came. So, mate, moving to Isaiah Tass, he had a really tough season last year. Talk us through him and what are his prospects this year? Do you see him starting on that wing?
I think he probably starts on that wing, but I really liked him to start because I thought, wow, he's cheap. But then I realized that he's cheap because he kind of didn't do great last year.
Yeah.
And depending on how long you've been playing fantasy, you've probably seen the right wing graveyard of fantasy options who somehow always seem to disappear, get dropped, get injured or something. And I'd say that's probably going to continue because Johnston's predicted to be back about round 4 to round 6, and I thought it
Yeah.
was later than that.
Yeah.
So I would say he'll probably drop out before Munro, considering how highly they rate Munro. So to be honest, he'll score better than he's priced, but I don't think he's going to have the time to make enough money unless Johnson goes um, only comes back in that round 6 or something like that. And yeah,
Yeah, it does make it a little bit tough for someone that you're probably not super confident on, but price wise, it'll be fairly low, and we'll just have to see probably what cash cows do come available. We'll skip Whiten, mate, near a 40 average, going back to centre. He's a lot better at 6, but Tyron Munro coming in at a 25 average should be priced pretty similar to that, but didn't play many games, so we'll see how that one shakes out. But plenty of talent, but mate, the injuries from the outside backs in this team is just wild, isn't it? Is this something that he can? Is this a trend he can buck? Yeah, given he's another year older.
I think there's definitely um, I think there's definitely reason to think that he'll have a much better year this year. And from training reports, it seems like he's sitting on that left side while Johnson is out.
Yeah, wow.
So falling over the line for a try on the end of some good left-hand side play seems like some good bonus that he'll get. He already had a decent try scoring rate on the right wing, but he's probably a bit younger and faster than Johnston, have a few more tackle breaks. And so I'm a lot higher on him than I am on Tass. And even when Johnson does come back, I'd still say he's in the team, at least, even if he's on the right wing, and maybe he can finish off the last little bit of his price rises there. So in a year where there's not a lot of cheap wing fullback value here, somebody that I am considering.
Yeah, well, he was the guy we were looking at last year, and then he just, yeah, it wasn't
Mm.
fit, just kept getting injured. So it was a bit of a rough one. But, mate, a few people talking about Cody Walker, maybe a little bit more on the Supercoach side, but looking at an average of 38.6, it's very low for what we know he can produce upwards of a 45 to 50. Is there any reason to start with him, or is it he's a little bit too old and we've got Latrell, back ready for round one and we'll just do too much?
I think it's a little bit of a combination of those. I do think it'll be better. I don't think it'll be better enough to warrant buying in fantasy. So he'll probably kick. He might kick a little bit more, but what Latrell also is starting to kick a fair bit last year. Dodd may be different and change kicking around. I think it's just going to be a factor of the Rabbitohs being better than last year and him improving his attack rather than that kicking.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could see 40s type situation for him, but given his age, and the fact that Latrell is looked like he was trying to run and own the team a little bit before he got injured. I'd say that it's probably his ceiling's a little bit more capped than previous years. So
Mm.
yeah, not someone I'm probably considering, but if he comes out strong, well, there's always reason to jump on.
He's fairly volatile, isn't he? And it's probably one to look at. You're like, oh, when Latrell's out of the team, he'll do a bit more, but the team won't be that great. So he'll
Mm.
suffer. And yeah, they'll be defending more, missing tackles, all that kind of stuff. And then when Latrell's there, his attack probably improves, but Latrell has his hands on the footy more. So yeah, there's less, could be less for Cody on that standpoint, and obviously the kicking as well. And we don't know what it's going to look like at halfback, do we? If it is Lewis Dodd, who we'll speak about next, we don't know what that share of kicking in general play is. Hopefully, we do find out a bit more in trials on Lewis Dodd, mate. But what are your thoughts on him? Have you had a look at any highlights packages or anything good like that?
Not so much from it was either Dodd or one other English player that I looked up the site. So it might have been Matty Nichols actually, but from training reports and what I can see, I think he's got a better short game than Ilias potentially. So maybe there'll be some good assist and attack from him like that. But yeah, it really just depends what his starting price is going to be because you get all these international imports and sometimes they're priced right where they average, and the fantasy's done a good job of predicting that. And sometimes they're a bit cheap, and you can go for them. So I'd say that he'll score a little bit better than Ilias did, but in order for him to be value, therefore, I'd say he'd need to be priced probably 35 or below.
Yeah,
And I don't know how much lower than 35 they put him.
yeah, that's right. Well, last year they put Kai Paul at about 520, which ended up being a solid price. We ended up getting some value out of him, and end up falling back to about that price. I know Supercoach had him a bit lower. They have Dodd, 330, so it's pretty similar to what they had Kyrgios Paul at. So we could get Dodd, who's been in a really good St. Helens team and has been, their main guy. I'm worried it's going to be, that 35 plus. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Hopefully, by few days' time. We do have all the answers. I think the back end of this week, mate, we'll know. Thank goodness. And I can't wait for that. Cannot wait for that opening
It's
video.
finally
That's for
getting
sure.
closer.
Oh, every day we're getting closer. And make sure you do subscribe, guys, or follow on podcasts and hit that notification bell. It's starting to ramp up, and we don't want you to miss any of this. It's way better, way more fun if you have a great season at fantasy watching the footy. Oh yeah, and you get to brag to your mates. That's for sure. But mate, someone I actually have a little bit of interest in this year, and it looks like you've given him a little bit of value, is David Moale. At 32.4, it's a bit of an awkward average, but do we see him stepping up into being one of the main guys in this middle forward rotation?
I think he definitely will to start the year. Long term, we'll see when Tatola comes back. Tatola just keeps getting injured, and the last one was pretty serious.
Mm.
So there is definitely reason to think that instead of Tatola switching back into that uh, main lineup, even though he was like South's best player of the year a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
that Moales, as he gets older and comes into sort of his peak performance age, he does turn into that main guy. So if he keeps Totola at bay and keeps high on the pecking order, he probably does go higher than what I've got him. Like he probably gets 40 instead of 36 at least. And then there's option to think that he's pretty good. But yeah, it's hard because it's going to be a couple rounds for Totola. And unless Moala comes out starting with 50 minutes, it's, I guess, a little hard to tell how that's going to thrash out.
Yeah, that's fair. You're looking for a bit more safety and role for sure. And when you're looking at him being, 5 minutes off Arrow, which if he was to play prop, would be how it goes. And we're obviously sweating on Aiken's fitness as well. But once Aiken does come back, if we're looking at it fairly early, which it seems like it is, when you've got Keon and Aiken both hitting pretty close to 80 minutes, and then Murray can be 65 to 80 at times, it makes it pretty tough to get minutes into these forwards. And we know how good Jairo is, right? To go along with, if it is Davy in the other start, which it should be, finish that way. And then you've got guys like Tallis Duncan on the bench who, are young improvers as well. I agree with the security wise. It can be hard to find those minutes for some of these guys, hey?
Yeah, I'd be more confident in minutes for some of these. 45 minute guys if Keon was at prop and Arrow was at second row instead of the other way around. But we'll just have to see our team lists thrash out, because one thing about Souths that has let them play Murray and some of these other guys for big minutes is that they always had like a Jacob Host or sometimes a Michael Cheekham for a couple of rounds, then he'd disappear. And they didn't always play 80. And if they've got Aitken there, who he like, surely he plays 80.
Yeah,
He'll
work up to it or
that
something.
does cut the minutes a little bit to go around.
Hmm.
So probably a wait and see for me for some of those guys. But if it pans out well for them, there's a good time to jump on.
Yeah, and it's probably if everyone's fit, it's probably a little bit too tough to see value in a bunch of those guys. But let's just say Aiken is out for the first few rounds, 3 rounds, 4 rounds. There's probably a little bit of benefit for Arrow and potentially David Moale on that
Yeah.
one there. But if it shakes out as is, yeah, as you said, the security of knowing what's going to happen, it's hard to have that for sure. And mate, Humphreys is it just a case of yes, he's going to be fairly cheap, but is he going to be a guy that we just have to wait and see once he gets to start if it happens through injury or something like that we can do a bit of a deeper dive and grab him because he had a really nice one game last year, didn't he?
Yeah, I hope that doesn't move his price too much. If I've sort of noticed that if somebody has one or two games of scores below 40, they generally don't change them too much. Like they'll put them at a 300K, 350K price.
Yeah.
But we'll see how they put Humphreys. So hopefully not too expensive. And even so, if he starts on the bench, he'll probably lose a lot of
Yeah.
that cash if he does start a bit later. So
It
maybe it
won't
doesn't
matter
matter so much.
for sure. And then with Tallis Duncan, mate, a few people are still really excited by Tallis and think he'll get some bigger minutes. Just we just don't see it to start the year.
I think that there's a solid chance he starts at edge, but with the looming return of guys like Totola and uncertainties as to who's going to play where in the pack, because I mean, Keon and Ara can play different places. Murray sort of maybe fit to begin the year, maybe not. There's a lot of up in the air. Duncan probably benefits from that for whoever's missing, but then once it's all there, he'd need to be playing pretty well to keep some of these guys out. I would probably say that the way he would get in if he were to stay in would be key on prop, Arrow, bench, middle, and then Duncan stays on the edge. But we'll see how that pans out.
Yeah, definitely. Not too much else to say on him at this stage. I don't think he had his chance last year, didn't he? Just never really. We thought he was going to get this big role, and then he just never really played and played less minutes, and then he got good minutes one game, and then was back to crap the next. So might just be they seem to go slow and steady with these middles. They've gone really slow with Davy, but he's just turning 21. He's just turned 21, which is crazy. I think he's in his fourth
Mm.
season. So yeah, is it time for him to be unleashed? Potentially. Potentially, that's for sure. And obviously with the new coach as well, we don't know exactly how it's all going to pan out. But to finish things off, mate, Cam Murray in that lock role, he's going to be touch and go for round one. It does seem like. So is that enough reason just to leave him for now with plenty of other middles and kind of wait for the correct opportunity with them? You've got ages until their first buy. So
Yeah, I think that's probably the smartest strategy. Like one thing that I did note is that because they bought Aitken, and Coleman Tony can play edge and Arrow can play edge, I don't think he'll move from lock now. I
yeah,
think under Wayne he just played lock anyway most of the time, so that his PPM probably stays high instead of moving to edge 40 minutes into a game when he's on 40 points and finishing on 50 instead of like 65 like we thought he might. So I think there'll be less of that this year. And I mean, as a result, if we do see different minutes rotations and Murray does push up from 65 minutes, I reckon he'll be a really, really gun scorer
mm.
because we know he goes really well at lock and he's priced at 55. So there's room for him to move up if things pan out.
Yeah. Well, I started with him a couple of years ago, and he was priced at 63 or something like that. And then last year, I think I started with him just a tick higher than this. So yeah, there's always a good reason because he's that tiny bit cheaper than than the top dogs, and he has scored that well before. That there's an easy reason to go for him. But those minutes do seem to fluctuate a little bit compared to that safety of a Yo, or that Payne Haas is going to get pretty well that 50 odd minutes each and every game. So, mate, it's a pretty interesting team. Where do you see them finishing this year? Are they, if things go well injury wise, do we see them as a top 8 team, or is
I
the Wayne
reckon.
effect that strong?
I think we also sort of forget, just because how bad they were in stretches toward the end of the year, how many injuries they had. Like, I think
Yeah,
for a chunk of it, they had none of their ideal back five there. And
yeah.
that was crazy. So I think they're going to improve quite a lot this year. What did I have them? I think I had them eighth or seventh.
Yeah.
And I'd say they might replace the Roosters in the top eight
Ooh.
if there's a chance.
Yeah, what about old just making me think of the backline they had. It was, Fletcher Myers was in there, partnered by the great Tane Milne, who had a month there where he was scoring tries and flick passes and offloads for fun. He was averaging near 50 for a month there, which was pretty crazy. Nowhere to be seen this year, hey?
Mm.
Funny,
It's
funny.
it's a very different look. So that's that. I mean, that's part of why this team's hard to predict. But we know there will be a chunk of value there. We've just got to be careful on which ones we pick.
Or wait, yeah, potentially if we
Mm.
know NRL there's injuries, and it seems like if there's one or two injuries in this squad especially, there's value to be had if they could get a little drop early and or less minutes early or bench or whatever, and then could step up into bigger roles. That's for sure. But yeah, if you have the balls to start with Latrell, then I think that's pretty cool. I think it'll be a fun watch. It's a scary watch with injuries and obviously the sin bins, but it'll yeah, it's crazy how good he can score with sin bins. It's just wild. But yeah, fun teammate. We'll leave that one there and we'll move on to St. George next.